Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a word that's just bursting with hope and promise, a word that appears all over the Bible: abundance. When you hear that word, what comes to mind? Maybe you think of overflowing bank accounts or a pantry stocked to the ceiling. And while those things can be blessings, the biblical idea of abundance is so much bigger, so much richer, and it touches every single part of our lives. Let's start in the very beginning, in the Garden of Eden. Genesis describes a place of incredible abundance. God didn't just create one type of tree. He created every tree that was pleasing to the eye and good for food. He didn't just make a few animals. He filled the earth, sky, and sea with creatures of all kinds. This wasn't a world of scarcity or just enough. It was a world of more than enough. A world designed from the start to display God's lavish generosity. This is our first glimpse of God's nature. He isn't a stingy God. He's a God of overwhelming abundance. Of course, we know the story doesn't stay in the garden. But even after humanity's fall, God's promise of abundance continues to weave its way through the biblical narrative. Think about Abraham. God promised him descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the seashore. That's not a promise of just enough descendants to carry on the family name. That's a promise of extravagant, uncountable, mind-blowing abundance. It was a promise so big that Abraham, at his age, could have easily laughed it off, but he chose to believe in a God who does things in a big way. This theme continues with the people of Israel. When they were slaves in Egypt, their lives were defined by scarcity and hard labor. But God promised them a new home, a land described over and over again as a land flowing with milk and honey. This is a beautiful, poetic image of agricultural abundance. It's a picture of a land so fertile and rich that sustenance isn't a constant struggle, but a bountiful gift. It was a promise of moving from a life of lack to a life of plenty, a direct reflection of God's desire to bless His people. Even when the Israelites were wandering in the desert, a place of natural scarcity, God showed His abundant provision. He didn't just give them a few crumbs of bread. He sent manna from heaven every morning, enough for everyone to gather what they needed. He didn't just provide a small sip of water. He made water gush from a rock. These miracles were daily reminders that even in the most barren of places, God's supply is limitless. His abundance isn't dependent on our circumstances. Let's fast forward to the Psalms. King David, a man who experienced both the palace and the wilderness, constantly wrote about God's abundance. In Psalm 23, he writes, "You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows." I love that image. Not just a full cup, but an overflowing cup. It speaks of a blessing that is so generous it can't be contained. It spills over. That's the kind of God David knew, a God who doesn't just meet our needs, but blesses us to the point of overflow. In Psalm 65, the psalmist praises God for the earth's abundance, saying, "You crown the year with your bounty, and your carts overflow with abundance." This imagery paints a picture of a divine farmer whose harvest is so massive that the carts carrying it are literally overflowing. It's a celebration of God as the source of all physical blessings, the one who provides rain and sun and makes the land fruitful. Now, all of this is incredible, but the concept of abundance in the Bible takes on its deepest and most profound meaning with the arrival of Jesus. When Jesus begins his ministry, what's one of the first miracles he performs? He turns water into wine at a wedding in Cana. And notice how he does it. He doesn't just create a few extra bottles to tide them over. He tells them to fill 6 stone water jars, each holding 20 to 30 gallons, to the brim. That's over 150 gallons of the best wine. It was an act of outrageous, extravagant abundance that not only saved the wedding host from embarrassment, but also revealed the glorious, generous nature of the kingdom Jesus was bringing. Jesus spoke about abundance often. In the famous story of the feeding of the 5,000, he starts with just 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. In a world of scarcity, this is a recipe for disaster. But in the hands of Jesus, it becomes a feast. Not only did everyone eat until they were full, but there were 12 baskets of leftovers. Again, not just enough, but more than enough. This miracle wasn't just about food, it was a living parable. Jesus was showing the world that he is the bread of life, and in him, there is spiritual nourishment that never runs out. This leads us to what is perhaps the most famous verse on this topic. In John chapter 10 verse 10, Jesus says, "The thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy. I have come that they may have life, and have it to the full." Some translations say have it more abundantly. This is the heart of the matter. Jesus didn't come just to give us a ticket to heaven or to help us scrape by in this life. He came to offer us a new kind of life, a life that is full, rich, deep, and overflowing. So what does this abundant life look like? It's not just about material wealth. Paul, in his letter to the Philippians, said he learned to be content whether he had plenty or was in need. This abundant life Jesus offers is so much more. It's an abundance of grace. Ephesians 1 says that God has lavished his grace upon us. It's not a trickle of grace, it's a flood. No matter how many times we mess up, his grace is more than enough to cover it. It's an abundance of peace in Philippians 4. Paul talks about a peace that surpasses all understanding. This isn't the absence of trouble. It's a deep, abiding peace that stands firm even in the middle of a storm, a peace that overflows from a heart that trusts God. It's an abundance of joy. The Bible doesn't promise a life free from sorrow, but it does promise a deep, underlying joy that is rooted in our relationship with God. Nehemiah 8:10 says, "The joy of the Lord is your strength." It's a joy that isn't dependent on circumstances but on the unchanging character of God. And it's an abundance of love. God's love for us isn't measured or conditional. The Apostle Paul prayed in Ephesians 3 that we might be able to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ. It's a love so vast, so abundant, that we can spend our entire lives exploring its depths and never reach the end. The Apostle Paul really understood this. In 2 Corinthians 9, while talking about giving, he says, "And God is able to bless you abundantly, so that in all things at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work." Notice the chain reaction here. God blesses us abundantly, not so we can hoard it for ourselves, but so that we can have everything we need to then overflow with abundance in the form of good works to others. We become channels of his abundance. Our overflowing cup is meant to spill over and fill the cups of those around us. So the biblical picture of abundance is a beautiful cycle. It starts with God, the source of all good things. He pours out his abundance on us spiritually, emotionally, and yes, sometimes materially. As we receive his abundant life, grace, and love, we are then empowered and called to live generously, to pour out love, kindness, and help to others, reflecting the generous heart of our God. It's a shift in mindset from scarcity to fear that there isn't enough to abundance, the faith that in God, there is always more than enough. It's about recognizing that the truest, most lasting abundance isn't found in what we can accumulate, but in who we have in Jesus. He is our overflowing cup. He is our land flowing with milk and honey. He is the abundant life we've all been searching for. Thank you so much for joining me today to explore this amazing topic. I hope it encouraged you to look for God's abundance in your own life. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing for more content like this. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Where have you seen God's abundance in your life? Until next time, take care.